Ever felt invisible in your own empire? Watch as Peter Williams battles unprofessionalism, restores his hotel's reputation, and teaches a lesson no one will forget. Trust, power, and a tough decision await. When Peter Williams, 47 years old, stepped out of his old sedan, he could feel the eyes around him focus on him. He stood before the grand gate of Skyline Towers, a luxurious hotel he had invested so much effort into building. This was one of the greatest achievements of his career, a 5-star hotel where a single night stay cost more than many people's monthly salary. However, at this moment, Peter felt as if he were invisible. No one acknowledged him, even though he was standing right in front of them. Looking through the hotel's glass window, Peter saw groups of guests chatting happily, staff in perfect uniforms attending to customers, but no one was looking his way. He felt like he was in a strange place, a place where he didn't belong. This wasn't the first time he had felt this way, but today, everything felt different. No limousine, no assistant by his side, just a regular man arriving at his own hotel. For this reason, he decided to come unannounced. He knew there were problems at this hotel. Continuous complaints about poor service, the indifferent attitude of staff, and issues with reservation management. Peter could have done what he always did. Call the manager, request an internal audit, throw some corporate jargon at the issue, and hope it fixes itself. But he no longer believed in solving problems that way. He wanted to face the truth himself. Stepping up to the front desk, Peter saw a young woman, Emma, sitting on a chair, absorbed in her phone, not noticing his presence. She didn't greet him, not even a glance. Peter cleared his throat again, trying to get her attention, but Emma just sighed, as if he were an inconvenience. Though he had mentally prepared himself, Peter couldn't help but feel offended. "Excuse me," Peter began. "I have a reservation. My name is Peter Williams." Emma didn't rush to look up. She just continued scrolling through her phone, with no regard for him. A few seconds passed, and Peter began to feel disappointed. But he remained patient and continued. "Could you double-check for me?" Peter tried to stay calm, but Emma's indifference to him made his heart beat faster, and the feeling of disappointment rose uncontrollably. This girl didn't care about his words at all, nor did she change her behavior. As she lazily tapped the keys, Peter could only stand there, staring at her, trying not to let his irritation show. He had worked so hard to create a friendly, professional environment for his hotel, but now, in this very space, he felt disregarded and treated as invisible. "Check again," Peter spoke up, maintaining a calm tone despite the growing frustration. He had faced countless challenges in his career, but this was the first time he felt so degraded. Emma, still not looking up, let out a loud sigh. "Nope, you must be mistaken," she replied in a tone completely devoid of respect. Peter could barely control his emotions. He felt like he was a worthless person in the very place he had invested so much effort to build. Feeling that he couldn't endure this indifference any longer, Peter pulled out his phone, found his confirmation email, and held it up for her to see. "Here, I have my booking right here." Emma raised an eyebrow, barely glancing at Peter's phone without making any effort to check it properly. The system doesn't lie," she muttered, returned to her phone, clearly not caring about his presence. Peter felt a surge of anger. The hotel system never failed. It was perfect, but this girl, with her indescribable indifference, was clearly doing everything she could to ignore him. This wasn't the system's fault. It was hers. He took a deep breath, tried to remain as calm as possible. "No, you check again," Peter insisted. He couldn't let this slide so easily. The frustration felt like a powerful wave, but he knew if he didn't stand up now, everything would go downhill in a much worse way. When Emma shrugged and continued with her work, Peter felt the anger inside him rising like a storm ready to erupt. He repeated one last time. "For the last time, check my booking." Now, it wasn't just about being disregarded. It was blatant disrespect. At that moment, the doorbell rang from the hallway, and the space suddenly became quieter. But Peter couldn't forget the contempt Emma had shown him. He had been the one to build this empire from scratch, and now it was being threatened by careless employees like her. Finally, Emma looked up at Peter, an expression of utter boredom in her eyes. "What's the problem now?" Let me check it again, she said, but her tone hadn't changed. She lazily tapped the keys, still holding her phone, her eyes never leaving the screen. Peter couldn't take it anymore. He looked at her screen, then glanced back at his own phone, and opened the internal system. A red line appeared. Reservation deleted by Emma. He couldn't believe his eyes. This girl had deleted his booking without any explanation, without any report. This wasn't a random glitch. This was a deliberate act. Emma had done this with full awareness. Suddenly, Peter felt a bitter sense of irony rise inside him. He flashed a challenging smile, facing her directly. Emma, I just checked the system, and I see that you just deleted my booking. Emma stopped typing, her eyes briefly flashing with panic. What? She stammered, trying to mask her fear. No, I just... She fell silent, unsure how to explain herself. Peter kept a smile on his face, but deep inside, he knew this had to be dealt with immediately. So, Emma, you're saying I made a mistake with my booking, right? I had the right time and place. And now, I can see everything in your system. Emma froze, her face turning red as she realized there was no way out of this deception. Peter knew it was time to make a big change, not just for himself, but for everyone he'd worked with over the years. Peter could no longer hold back his frustration. He took a deep breath, turned to Emma, and spoke with calmness, but his voice was sharp as a knife. You're going to have to explain to me why you did this. Yes, I know you did it, and you can't hide it anymore. His words weren't soft. No one, not even those working for him, had the right to treat him like this, especially in a hotel he owned. Emma, now pale from the tension, remained silent, her hand trembling as it held the computer mouse. Peter felt a momentary pang of pity for her, but that feeling was fleeting. He had been in her shoes before, when things weren't easy, when you struggled with poor decisions and felt like there was no way out. But unlike Emma, he never let weakness overtake him. All right, Peter continued, his gaze cold as he stared at her. You've done wrong, and we're to solve this together. He pulled out his phone and immediately called the hotel management. His management system was set up to track every move of his employees, and everything was recorded. He was prepared for a conversation no one could avoid. Hello, this is Peter Williams. I need an immediate meeting with all the staff. Emma will be suspended while we investigate this issue. He emphasized every word, making sure everyone understood he wasn't joking. A moment of silence passed. Emma stood there, her eyes wide, trying to find some excuse, but in her mind, all excuses were pointless. Peter knew what she had done had crossed an irreparable line, and for him, he was standing at the threshold of a revolution in his own company. Thank you. Don't make me repeat myself, Peter said, then hung up the phone. He turned back to look at Emma, his face unchanged. Emma, could you hold on to that chair for me a little longer? I think your job will soon have a very clear outcome. In an instant, everything had changed. What had once been a quiet space now felt like a moment of inevitable transformation. All eyes in the hotel seemed to shift toward this moment, toward Peter Williams, the founder, the owner, and now the one who was going to shift the tides once again. Peter walked into his office, feeling as though he had just emerged from a battle. The spacious room, with its large glass windows offering a view of the city's skyline at night, was bathed in the glow of sparkling lights reflecting off the glass. It created a cold yet commanding atmosphere. He sat down at his desk, placed his mobile phone down, and slowly rubbed his temples, feeling as though each nerve in his body was stretching tight. Everything had changed in a single night. The way Emma, the new receptionist, had treated him wasn't just a mistake. It had been intentional. And for Peter, that was something he could not accept. He had been forced to make a difficult decision, to take decisive action, without mercy, to show everyone at the hotel that he would never tolerate such unprofessionalism. No sooner had he sat down when he received a call from the management department. Henry, the shift manager, sounded anxious. Mr. Williams, we received word about Emma being suspended, but we can't confirm that she deleted the customer's reservation, as you said. Can we double-check? Peter was not the type of person to overlook small details. He had enough data to prove that Emma had deliberately deleted his reservation. His anger bubbled up impossible to suppress. Henry, I confirmed it from the internal system. If she can do this once, she can do it to anyone. Don't doubt me, Peter said, his voice calm but as sharp as a razor. There was a moment of silence on the line before Henry responded. We will conduct a full review of the records and clarify the situation. But this could affect our reputation. Peter smirked. Our reputation? If we don't handle this properly, that reputation will crumble before anyone even realizes it. He paused for a moment, feeling like everything was closing around him. Call a meeting first thing tomorrow. I want to see all the staff. I'm not letting this slide. After hanging up, Peter stood up and walked over the window. The city's lights flickered dimly below, but in his eyes, it looked like a perfect portrait of control and power. He had built this empire from the ground up, and there was no one, not an employee, not a customer, who could break it. It was time for people at the hotel to realize one thing. When they worked for Peter Williams, they had to understand clearly that power would not be given to those who were unworthy. And Emma, despite her mistake, would be a lesson to everyone who thought they could play with the rules Peter had established. The next morning, as the first light of dawn streamed to the large windows of the hotel, Peter walked into the conference room with a determined sense of purpose. The room was already filled with people, the air thick with tension. It felt like a storm was brewing, yet Peter Vance was the only one who didn't feel uneasy. He stood across from a management team, his arms crossed, his sharp gaze focused on them. We're not just talking about a system error here, Peter began, his voice clear and commanding. We're talking about a much more serious issue. The way Emma treated me and our customers cannot be tolerated. One of the staff members, Mark, glanced nervously at the papers on the table before shifting his worried gaze toward Peter. We're going to review all of Emma's records, Mr. Williams, but we need to know exactly what happened before making a decision. Peter tilted his head and gave a small, knowing smile. Mark, I've checked her records. She deliberately deleted my information from the system. This wasn't a mistake. Everything was intentional. But if we handle this wrong, it could damage the reputation of the hotel and the company. Mark continued, his voice shaky. Our reputation? Peter scoffed. Our reputation won't be harmed if we handle this properly. If we don't act, that reputation will collapse before anyone even realizes it. The room fell silent, the tension now unbearable. Peter stood up, walked around the table, and then returned to face everyone. Now is the time for everyone to understand that we don't just sell hotel rooms. We sell credibility. If an employee cannot grasp that, they don't belong here. And today, I'm making a decision. Emma will be fired immediately. She hasn't just broken procedure. She's broken our trust. Everyone in the room remained silent, quietly nodding in agreement. Peter continued, Right now, I want you to go through all the records, reach out to customers, and I want a detailed report within 24 hours. It's time for us to show the entire hotel team that no one can disrespect our customers. No one can disrespect our rules. With his firm words, Peter knew he had made it clear to everyone. No matter what they thought, the power in his hands would not be questioned. He was not one to easily overlook mistakes. As the others stood up and left the room, Peter sat alone, staring out the window. The sunlight was beginning to reflect off the buildings across the way, and he knew one thing for sure. The night was over, but the battle against this unprofessionalism had only just begun. The hotel would change, and Peter Williams would be the one to decide how it would happen. After the meeting, Peter Vance stood in his office, his eyes still fixed on a computer screen. The customer reports, service feedback, and complaints he had collected since the morning still didn't bring him any comfort. He knew that things weren't going to be easy. Even though he had fired Emma, the hotel's problems couldn't be solved with just one action. His hand reached out, grabbed his phone from the desk, and he started calling one of his old clients, someone who had been vocal about criticizing the hotel on social media. He wasn't sure what to expect from this call, but had decided not to let silence and neglect continue to linger within the company any longer. Hello, this is Peter Williams, he began, his voice dry and authoritative. I want to thank you for your feedback. And I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience you experienced during your stay at our hotel. There was a brief silence on the other end before the man responded. Peter, I honestly didn't expect a call from you. To be honest, I didn't think your hotel could take this issue seriously. Peter took a deep breath. I understand your frustration. We mishandled the situation in the past, and I want to make it clear that we have changed. And if possible, I would like to invite you back to give us a chance to make things right. The man scoffed over the phone. Invite me back? I was treated like a stranger in my own hotel, and now you're asking me to come back? That doesn't seem very feasible. Peter paused for a moment, feeling his resolve rising within him. You don't have to come back immediately, but I want to make it clear that we've changed. If you give us another chance, I promise to do everything we can to make you feel like the most important guest here. You deserve that. After a long pause, the man responded, his tone less tense than before. You seem serious, Peter. If things really improve, I'll give you another chance. Peter nodded, even though the person on the other end couldn't see it. Thank you. We won't let you down. He hung up, leaned back in his chair, and glanced around his office. This wasn't a complete victory, but it was a big step in his plan to turn things around. He knew there would be more calls, more demanding clients, but at least he had managed to restore trust in one person. Now, Peter had to focus on improving every department in the hotel. He had to make changes from the ground up, not just from calls like this, but from every employee behind every customer service interaction. He was ready to fight, not just for the hotel's reputation, but for his own future. Peter stepped out of his office and looked through the large window, where the sunlight shone decisively. Today, he had earned a small amount of trust, and from here, he would not stop. The next day, Peter Williams was ready to continue taking action. After the call the previous evening had gained him a bit of trust from the customer, he knew that this was only the beginning. Today would not be just an ordinary day. It was a day to prove to those who still doubted his ability to bring change to himself and the hotel. As Peter walked into the hotel early in the morning, the atmosphere was still tense. The staff were running around, working with tired expressions and lack of motivation. Peter knew that phone calls and promises alone wouldn't change the current situation. He needed to create significant changes, and to do that, he had to go directly to the places where people didn't dare to look. Walking into the front desk area, he immediately encountered one of the longtime employees, a woman named Lisa. She had been with the hotel for many years, but recently, she had shown a lack of enthusiasm and indifference toward her work. Peter stared at her for a while, then decided not to speak immediately. Lisa glanced at him with a tired look, as if she knew he wasn't here to praise her. "Peter, what's going on?" she asked, her voice full of a sigh. Peter stepped closer, not giving her the chance to avoid him. "Lisa, I need a moment of your time. I know your work is tough, but I need your help to make this place better. It's not about criticizing anyone. It's about helping all of us change." Lisa looked at him for a moment, then shrugged. I'm just doing my job. If there's a problem, I can't fix everything." Peter took a deep breath, trying to control the rising frustration. "It's not just you, Lisa. We need everyone, not just to work for the money, but because we're representing a brand that people will remember." He didn't wait for her to respond. "Go out there and help the customers. Lisa, if no one sets the example, no one will see the true value of the service." The employee simply nodded, saying nothing more. Peter turned back to the front desk and started reviewing the customer feedback over the past few days. Some had expressed dissatisfaction with the staff's attitude, particularly regarding delays in handling requests. He pulled out a list and began working with the staff, calmly but decisively, while everyone was still working. Peter kept looking around, trying to spot any signs of negligence or lack of care. Not long after, an unexpected call rang through. "Hello, this is Robert, the customer from yesterday. I wanted to express my disappointment with your service." Peter could no longer ignore it. He listened as Robert shared his concerns and feedback, feeling a sharpness creeping into his voice. "I apologize for making you feel that way, but I assure you we will address this immediately. You can trust me." The sense of change was palpable. Each call, each meeting was a new challenge, and Peter knew that while things were still difficult at times, this was the opportunity to rebuild a hotel's reputation. He wouldn't stop until the hotel became a place customers would want to return to. After a week filled with challenges and tension, Peter Williams finally began receiving positive signals from both customers and staff. While the major changes hadn't happened overnight, there was a faint light shining through. He could clearly feel a shift in the atmosphere at the hotel. From the skeptical looks of the staff, they were beginning to show more care in their work. Customer feedback, although still containing some minor complaints, was no longer as heavy as before. On a Friday morning, as Peter walked into the hotel, he noticed a clear change in the attitude of the team. The staff no longer appeared lazy or unmotivated. Even Lisa, the employee he had spoken to a few days prior, had started to change her attitude. She was no longer indifferent to her work, and Peter was pleased to see her warmly welcoming customers. However, everything wasn't perfect yet. Peter knew that sustainable changes needed time. He walked into his office, sat down at his desk, and began reviewing all the reports from the past week. One thing he noticed was that, while the staff's attitude had improved, there were still gaps in the processes. Complaints about delays in service were still surfacing, and although some small improvements had been made, they weren't enough to meet customer expectations. Peter understood that to truly change the situation, he couldn't just rely on changing staff attitudes, but had to restructure the workflows. He needed to improve the efficiency of the services, from simple tasks like managing reservations to room services. Everything had to be done the right way and quickly. Improvement isn't an event, it's a process, Peter reminded himself. This saying echoed in his mind like a valuable lesson he had learned over the past few days. Every time he encountered a challenge, he had to remind himself that instead of worrying about the small problems, he needed to focus on solving the bigger issues to achieve sustainable change. Peter decided to meet with department heads to discuss improvements in workflow processes. He emphasized that the hotel's success didn't just depend on staff attitude, but also on the systems they implemented every day. A clear and simple system would help minimize errors, enhance customer satisfaction, and ultimately bring profits to the hotel. Peter also knew that changing long-established habits wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face that challenge. Once these changes started to take effect, Peter knew that the hotel would not only offer great service, but would also become a strong brand, deserving of the customer's expectations. And perhaps this was the most important step in the journey of rebuilding the empire he had created. After a month of relentless effort, Peter Williams finally saw the results of the changes he had implemented. Although the hotel still faced some challenges, the atmosphere in the company had noticeably improved. The employees it once had to push had begun to take more initiative in their work, and their customer service attitudes no longer carried the indifference they once had. They were beginning to see that all their efforts were being recognized and rewarded. One Saturday morning, Peter stood at the front desk, observing the bustling activity of the hotel. Though it wasn't perfect, he noticed a distinct difference in how customers were being greeted. There were no more frustrated questions or unnecessary complaints. The staff was smiling and engaging with the customers as a true team, not just individuals working in their own way. "Thank you for trusting us." A front desk employee greeted a customer with a bright smile, something Peter had never seen before. He felt a huge shift from the staff he had once struggled to train. Even though much had improved, Peter knew that this was just the beginning. He had learned that to sustain this change, he could not stop now. What was important was to build a company culture where everyone felt responsible and truly understood their roles. This project is still a long way to go, Peter thought to himself as he observed. I must keep pushing and improving. One of the greatest lessons Peter had learned was persistence and determination. Instead of merely trying to resolve short-term issues, he had learned that to build a strong organization, you must stay committed to long-term goals. Change never happens overnight, and only continuous effort can help you overcome significant challenges. That day, Peter also received positive feedback from customers. They were not only satisfied with the quality of service, but also appreciated the enthusiasm and professionalism of the staff. A sense of pride swelled within Peter. He understood that, although it wasn't perfect yet, he was on the right path. There's nothing more valuable than seeing everything you do matter. Peter smiled to himself, his heart full of confidence and hope for the days ahead.